Hey guys, Taylor here with Spraungel Performance Marine. Welcome back to another episode of Beast My Boat. Today, we've got a Warrior 238 big boy in here. Here's the story on this boat. This guy took delivery of this boat last fall. He had the dealer do the initial rigging of it. The dealer kind of helped him pick graphs. Ultimately, he's been very dissatisfied. A lot of poor rigging in this boat. So he brought it to us to bring this thing to where it needs to be. Let me go over quick what we're gonna do with it. So on the front, we're gonna be taking this Tarova and this HDS 9 off. We're gonna be replacing these with a Garmin force crack and trolling motor with an LVS 34 on it and two Garmin 8612s up on the bow. We're gonna have another LVS 34 on this Brew City pole. We're gonna take this HDS 16 off and we're gonna replace this with two 8612s. And then the back, we're gonna be doing a Reactor 40 kicker autopilot with a 1243. And then for transducers, we're going to be running the GT56 and an Airmar high wide on it. This is going to be a sick install, so stay tuned. So the first thing we like to do when we get a boat in, whether it's a new install or adding to an existing install, is just to open all the panels up in the boat, just kind of look around the boat, see what's in there, see what we're going to reuse, if we're going to reuse anything or what we're going to add, and then ultimately just to address if there's anything else in the boat that maybe we see when we're in there that's going to cause issues, so that way we can let the customers know, we can fix stuff as it's in the shop. Okay, so we're just tearing apart this Warrior here. Here's what I'm noticing right away. This is the power that he's got his graphs running off of. This is 18 gauge. This has got a long way to go to get to the battery in this boat. Doing some quick math on voltage drop and stuff like this, this is definitely not adequate power for any graph, even if it's a little 9. He did have a 12 up here, I believe, at one point. So he's for sure not getting the best power that he possibly can. And I suspect that in every graph that we see in this boat, we're gonna have the same inadequate wire. So we're definitely gonna be pulling all this stuff out and running heavy gauge wire so everything's working crystal clear. So most boats don't come with adequate wiring from the factory. There's a whole bunch of information you guys can look up on it, but ultimately what happens with voltage over distance with DC wiring is you get voltage drop if you don't have proper power. Now these graphs are really expensive. They're supercomputers at this point. So if you're not supplying the graph with the proper power, they're not going to function correctly. And how they're going to make up for that lack of voltage is by drawing more amperage. And more amp draw is going to decrease your battery time on top of all the other issues that are going to come with it. So running proper wire to your graphs and having them wired the way that they need to be is extremely important and extremely beneficial to you in the long run. So right now I'm just installing the ram on the autopilot. This is the steering ram that's going to steer the kicker. Kind of hear the motor working or whatever. And then my next step is going to be to mount the ECU box in the boat, get this thing wired up in the Neiman network, and then he will have full throttle and steering control off of his kicker. So the Garmin Reactor 40 autopilot for the kicker is a really cool device. Basically what it does is it takes over steering and speed control from the kicker. So you can plot on your graph a course to follow with points. You can tell it to zigzag, you can tell it to make circles, you can tell it to do whatever you want. And then what you can do that most people do is you can just do a straight heading hold. So if you're trolling a basin on the Great Lakes or whatever, you can just set it to go in a direction and it will compensate versus wind and anything else. What's really nice is with the toolbar pulled up on all the Garmin graphs is you can adjust the heading by a 1 or 10 degree increment. So if you want to move out a little bit deeper, you can move out. If you want to move in a little bit deeper or a little bit shallower, you can move in. And ultimately, it's just a really useful tool. They call it the Reactor because this thing is quick. I mean, it will move that kicker back and forth and back and forth. And when we went on the water and tested it, we had that big boat going crossways with the wind and it was keeping us dead on. The customer was really happy with it. And if you're worried about the kicker not being able to turn a big boat like that, don't worry, it does it phenomenally. So what I'm doing right now with this insane bundle of wires is this is actually all of the harnesses that's going in this boat. The way we do it is a true 10 gauge harness. So every unit gets its own 10 gauge conduit wire running to it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna straighten all these out, get them uncoiled, and then I'm actually going to put twists in these bundles of wires. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna reduce any kind of RF interference that could possibly get picked up from the boat and ensure that he gets the absolute cleanest possible signal he possibly can on all of his graphs. So Garmin has really stepped up their game. This boat we did a full Garmin setup on. You know, he's got the Kraken trolling motor, he's got the Reactor 40 kicker autopilot, he's got all GPS map graphs, he has the Airmar transducer, the GT56, and 2 live scopes. And what's really nice about Garmin is their integration is absolutely seamless. So we're running all these devices to a central hub system. That means that no matter what devices are on in the network, they're automatically going to speak to each other. The Garmin GPS map series, you know, they automatically power on when one is powered on. So it's kind of a really neat system to just keep everything integrated. And that way, you know, if he wants to control his autopilot on the kicker in the front, he can. If he wants to control his trolling motor all the way in the back, he can. It just makes it really easy to fish. You know, he can see his live scope on the front, in the back, if he wants to put his trolling motor down and use that to scan and then use a side pole to locate fish. There's really a lot of options, so it's really important that you do actually network all your graphs. Aside from other things like, you know, having the ping sync and the graphs, knowing where these sonar sources are coming from is going to help with your clarity. But ultimately, just having everything synced up and having everything sharing so you can find everything that you'd possibly want on every graph in the system. Okay, so right now we've pretty much got everything ran. We've got the Ethernet boxes mounted up under there. We've got power under there. We've got the NEMA under there. So we're gonna kind of connect everything up, get the power cables hooked up, and tie everything up under here and kind of start doing the final assembly. But just come on and see what we got going on in here. Look at my little fun house. Can't find anything because your boat is a complete and total mess?
Introducing the Supreme Sack. The Supreme Sack is a game changer, a see-through storage bag that stands upright, ensuring you can easily spot and access your favorite baits in a snap. Crafted for durability and water resistance, the Supreme Sack can withstand the toughest fishing conditions, keeping your valuable baits safe and sound with a quick zip feature. You can seal up to 25 bait bags effortlessly, making your prep time a breeze. No more fumbling around. Stay organized, save time, and focus on what you love. Fishing. The Supreme Sack, where innovation meets convenience. Get yours today and experience the joy of a clutter-free tackle box, because when it comes to fishing, every moment counts.
To order, visit SupremeLureCo.com. That's SupremeLureCo.com.
Working on this Kraken here. We just got the Kraken in. I was ready to rip and roll on it, and I already did one this week. And I was like, all right, sweet. Put the live scope on it, everything's gonna go good. Found out that the live scope mount that goes on the Kraken is on back order, and we won't have that until tomorrow. So I'm just trying to piece everything else together, change up my whole program. I think we're gonna hook up the trolling motor power, get done with that, run all the cables that we can, and get everything ready for when we get that mount.
So the Garmin Kraken trolling motor is really neat for you guys that are running Garmin systems. It's obviously got the full network integration. Same thing, you can plot courses on it. You can adjust the trolling motor from the graph. It's a brushless trolling motor, so you've got cool, quiet power, long battery life. They come in some insanely long shaft lengths too, so customers like this with a 238 or your bigger walleye boats, It's an awesome motor for that. The other really neat piece about it is they have a kit that will engrave a live scope kit into the motor itself. So you can have your LVS 32, your LVS 34, or your LVS 62 live scope transducer onto the trolling motor. And what's neat about that is normal electric steer trolling motors, you couldn't normally do that without some crazy fit kit on it, but Garmin has came up with a way that you can mount those transducers seamlessly on the trolling motor, and that way you guys that are in need of a longer trolling motor shaft can still have live scope on your trolling motor. The other nice thing about the Kraken is you can get the optional foot pedal for it, and it's the same rock back and forth style foot pedal like an Ultrex has. So ultimately, if you've got a Garmin graph set up and you're looking for a trolling motor that's a big dog, that might be the good motor for you.
Got these two Garmin's mounted up here. Stack is the best look for this. We got one that's going to be running off the live scope. We got one that's going to be running the transducer and the Kraken. They're all networked together. They're all running through a port underneath the dash, so you can't even see that. You know, it looks real clean. I like how they're right on top of each other. It's kind of like a seamless transition here. Warrior makes a really sturdy mount up front. It's fiberglass behind the metal plate, so these graphs aren't going anywhere. You're gonna have to spear some 20-foot waves if you want those to go anywhere.
So the graph that's in the back of the boat, a lot of people might wonder what that's for. So this customer does a lot of trolling on the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, Lake Skagawea, Lake Oahe, stuff like that. So basically what he can do with that is if he or a buddy of his is kind of running lines and stuff like that while the other guys are hanging out, you know, as he's pulling lines in or setting lines, he can adjust his autopilot accordingly. That goes back to the full Garmin integration. You know, and that just makes it really easy to see what's going on at a glance and have that screen up close instead of having to turn your head and, you know, see what's going on those screens that are in a boat this big pretty far away. So we're kind of getting to the end of this install, wrapping stuff up, and what I'm doing right now is I'm cleaning up this battery compartment and kind of making sure where stuff is running. We've got our harnesses right here for all of the graphs. What I noticed is what the dealer did is they took, he's got this Group 31 Odyssey AGM in here that's obviously hooked into the boat power, and then they added a 120 amp hour ionic lithium, which in theory what you should do is you should have that be running your electronics, but they just tied it directly into the boat power. They didn't put any kind of buffer, any kind of isolator, nothing. That was just parallel with this battery, and you never ever want to do that. Not only do these batteries have different capacities as far as amp hours, but they also run on different voltage and they take a little bit different charging sequences. So this guy's really lucky he didn't run into any problems. At the very minimum, it's hard on your lithium. At the very worst, I mean, anything can happen, but he literally had these two batteries just running in the same slots that this AGM is hooked up to in all of his boat power. And ultimately, he wasn't even getting the setup that he wanted with a separate electronics battery. So just make sure when you're having a dealer rig your boat, if you don't feel super confident, ask a lot of questions, because something like this can cause a lot of issues down the road.
We're just hooking in the battery charger here. We got the new one all mounted. Obviously, he's got a mix match of AGM and lithiums. We always go with the Minn Kota PCLs for that. They do you know, any chemistry. We're just running extensions here because we got, Taylor just talked about it, we got an AGM and a lithium down in the back. We got two trolleys here, so we got to run two extendos to the back batteries.
So we normally like to do a little wrap-up video. This customer actually came to us from South Dakota. I believe he lives somewhere around Lake Oahe, and we had a pretty bad storm rolling in, and we wanted to get on the water with the customer to kind of go over things. So we had to kind of cut it short. Luckily we got some videos of the boat that we'll show you, but that's why we didn't have our traditional walkthrough of the boat when it was all finished up, because he had to get back and I didn't want him driving late through the night through a storm.